Nietzsche's Doctrine of Eternal Recurrence by Karl Lowith in Journal of History Ideas back in 1945, because Cinesemiatics asked. Cool. So here we go. And as always, feel free to ask questions and find out what this is all about. And I think I have a very Heideggerian interpretation of the Eternal Recurrence, but we'll find out what this one is. So, quote, that the separate philosophical ideas are not anything optional, that, however suddenly and arbitrarily they seem to appear in the history of thought, they nevertheless belong just as much to a system of the collective members of the fauna of a continent, is betrayed in the end by the circumstance. How unfailingly the most diverse philosophers always fill in again a definite fundamental scheme of possible philosophies. Under an invisible spell, they always revolve once more in the same orbit. Their thinking is in fact far less a discovery than a re-recognizing, a remembering, a return, a homecoming to a far-off ancient common household of the soul, out of which those ideas formerly grew. Philosophizing is so far of a kind of atavism of the highest order. Yeah, so again, this looks like philosophy. We haven't really gone anywhere. We're just everyone's kind of their time and place. Nietzsche, like any thinker, may be approached at the point of least resistance or at the point of greatest resistance. We encounter little difficulty in reading Nietzsche, the brilliant, though often repellent writer of aphorisms on cultural problems. But we find great difficulty in trying to read him as a consistent philosopher. Certainly it was not his desire to be merely a writer in season, but to be a first and a last philosopher, in particular a philosopher of the eternal recurrence, and thereby of eternity. It is true that Nietzsche was also a philosopher of his time, but his innumerable reflections on the cultural problems of our age are to be understood within the wide horizon of our twofold inheritance, the classic and the Christian tradition, both of which believed in an eternal order. As a philosopher of our time, Nietzsche was not concerned with the time being, but was unzeitgemäß, out of season. In the preface to the second something or other German on the use and abuse of history, he defines his untimeliness by saying that he could not have ventured to judge the present age if he had not been a pupil of the classic age. The time in which Western man and thought originated was to him the source and standard by which he could hope to become effective in and against the present time. Toward the end of his reflections on history, he goes even further, outlining the possibility of a super-historical standpoint from which the whole distinction between past and future loses its relevance. For if we look at the totality of being and time, every moment is equally significant. The most radical statement, however, of Nietzsche's, untimeliness is to be found in his attack on Richard Wagner. What is the first and last thing that a philosopher demands of himself? To overcome his age in himself, to become timeless. With what then does the philosopher have the greatest fight? With all that in him which makes him a child of his time. Very well then. I am just as much a child of my age as Wagner, that is, I am a decadent. The only difference is that I have recognized the fact that I have struggled against it. The philosopher in me has struggled against it. End quote. So that was all a quote with Nietzsche saying that I've tried to be better than Wagner, because Nietzsche recognizes that he is trying to get out of time. But I mean, of course, how do you jump out of time? Like, that doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense when you say it like that. But in some sense, you're trying to get out of your age of thought. So going back to the classical thinking. Okay, by this attempt to free himself from the mere contemporaneous, Nietzsche became a philosopher of his age and, 100 years after, a worthy subject of commemoration. In 1884, after the completion of Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote in a letter from Venice, My work has time. I do not at all want to be misjudged as though I were concerned with the particular task of the present time. 50 years hence, a few men will probably realize what I have done. For the time being, it is not only difficult, but, according to the laws of historical perspective, simply impossible to discuss me publicly without remaining infinitely behind the truth. 50 years hence falls exactly in 1934. At that time, Nietzsche's truth had indeed become a matter of public discussion and worldwide significance. This truth has an exoteric and an esoteric aspect, the one called neo-paganism and the other eternal recurrence. The doctrine of eternal recurrence, which seems to us today as the strangest, if not the most absurd invention of a modern mind, was to Nietzsche himself the fundamental issue of his philosophy. Like the Christian gospel of a stumbling block to the Jews and a foolishness to the Greeks, Nietzsche's gospel of eternal recurrence is a stumbling block and foolishness to those who still believe in the modern gospel of progress, which is a secularized form of Christian eschatology. Whether foolish or wise, the doctrine of eternal recurrence is the key to Nietzsche's philosophy, and it also illuminates his historical significance because it revives the controversy between Christianity and paganism. Alright, so this author really, really, really likes the eternal recurrence. This is like, they say this is the whole thing to Nietzsche's philosophy, the key, and makes it historically significant. So it's not just Nietzsche, it has to do with the history, because it makes a 2,000 year, like, because Christianity has been around 2,000 years, a 2,000 year sort of claim. So that's something. So, alright, so Nietzsche's doctrine is a definite answer to a definite problem which can be discovered in his earliest thought. He treats it for the first time at the age of 18, 20 years before Zarathustra, in two papers written at college on fate and history and the freedom of the will and fate. At the beginning, he confesses that it will be extremely difficult to establish a standpoint from which to judge our traditional Christian interpretation of life. Such an attempt, he says, may well be the task of a lifetime, for how can we discard with impunity the authority of 2,000 years? It would appear youthful frivolity to embark without a compass upon a sea of doubt in search of a new continent. Why not cling to history and natural science instead of indulging in vague speculations on the Christian or non-Christian meaning of life? But we cannot avoid the fundamental question of man's significance in the totality of the world, the meaning of human will, and the history within the non-human universe. For is history not very causal and contingent as compared with the eternal revolution of the heavenly bodies and its cosmic necessity? Are the events of history perhaps only the dial plate indicating the ever self-repeating movement of a hand which has no inner relation to the indicated events? Or is there an eternal cycle comprising human decisions as well as natural occurrences? Can we conceive humanity as an inmost circle within the circle of cosmic fate, so that the hidden spring in the greatest clock of being is humanity? To conceive, however, such a synthesis of the free will which creates history with universal fate or necessity, the philosopher would have to transcend the human, all too human standpoint and look at things from beyond humanity. It is the standpoint which Nietzsche eventually found in his conception of the Superman Zarathustra 6,000 feet beyond man and time. At first, however, he states the antinomy between will and fate. In the freedom of the will lies the principle of emancipation and separation from the embracing totality of being, while fate reintegrates the emancipated will into it. At the same time, fate evokes also the power and freedom of willing as a counter-movement to the stubbornness of necessity. Absolute freedom would transform man into a creator god, absolute necessity into an automaton. That's all a quote. So I guess like we're saying here is like, look, you've got like the determinism of science just sort of marching along, and then you've got free will, which allows you to basically create yourself, which is the will to power here in like early Nietzsche, I guess, is to go against the fates. So you've got two things that are pulling at each other that don't seem to how do you actually think about life? Is it like us making ourselves, or is it us, doing what the universe does? The author says, apparently this problem can be solved only if free will were the highest potency of fate. Yeah, so in other words, if free will were, had a higher priority than, naturalistic science. So that means free will was trumping the determinism of the natural world. A year later, Nietzsche wrote an autobiographical sketch in which he formulated once more the problem to which the will to eternal recurrence became the answer. After a short description of his Christian Protestant background, he discusses the stages by which man has outgrown everything which once sheltered him, and then he asks the question, quote, "But where is the ring which will at last, after the dissolution of the Christian order by which man and the world have had a common ground as creatures of God, encompass him? Is it the world or is it God?" End quote. Interpreted in terms of Nietzsche's mature philosophy, this alternative means, is the ultimate standard and pattern of our existence the classic view of the world as an eternal cosmos revolving in periodic cycles, or is it the Christian view of the world as a unique creation out of nothing called forth by the omnipotence of a non-natural God? Is the ultimate being a divine cosmos recurrent like a circle in itself, or a personal God revealing himself not primarily in nature, but in and to humanity under the sign of the cross? 20 years later, Nietzsche had definitely decided that it is the world which redeems our contingent existence, reintegrating the Christian ego, which, quote, "since Copernicus has fallen from the center toward an X," end quote, which into the order of cosmic necessity, that is, into the eternal recurrence of the same. And Fernald says, "I honestly believe that modern neuroscience and developments in behavioral studies have rendered a lot of older classic theories of behavior a bit useless. What do you think?" Yeah, I mean, our overly simplistic theories of mind are getting trounced by, the contemporary ones. I personally I don't think determinism makes sense. I don't like the theory behind it. So I don't actually think there is any sort of control in the universe. I don't know if that really makes a whole lot of sense. The notion of that things are happen by necessity. I don't know if our concept of necessity is the right one. I think it's wrong. So it's even though we have these theories, they're not actually going to give us what they think they're giving us. They're not telling us how things, what controls actually, what is actually happening. Not Maslow, any of that stuff. A lot of that stuff, it's getting there, but I don't think there's any. You just everything is descriptive. I don't think it's causal though. You can describe what's going on, but we're not actually acting according to those rules. You're kind of describing how people are looking at our behaviors, but I don't actually think we can this is just my personal view. I just don't see how we're controlled by these things. The theories we come up with are more descriptive. I'm very, very Humean in this way, and so it's even the more hard science ones, I see exactly the same. I don't see any difference that we're in some sense determined by the theories of neuroscience or stuff. So I find them all a bit useless. I mean, they tell us many things, especially when things go wrong. You can say, hey, something's gone wrong over in this area, but I don't know if we're controlled. Semiotic says, still those early efforts at finding theories that worked led to where we eventually got, so it's still important work to come up with hypotheses that were decreasingly wrong. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, it's good for diagnostics. You can see when things go wrong, you can start to fix the problems. You can say, hey, this is when this is looking not like everyone else's, then we got to fix that because it gets back to it. The problem is I don't know what health means. We don't know what it is to be a proper human. We just have sort of these averages. And so you say, hey, look, let's get this person's, whatever these numbers are, some chemical back up to everything else. So yeah, of course we're learning new stuff and it's important. And so, yeah, as Ann says, it's important to know the evolution of thought, how we're doing this. And we're getting better at certain things. But this is the thing, that there is some sort of cosmic necessity and eternal recurrence. This is necessity at some huge level. And, I mean, these are not even, scientific thoughts. These are, global cosmos level necessities. And so this isn't really a science, it's not our science, which focuses on very small cases. Does anyone see the irony here that we are not referring to the eternal return? Missing it. I'm probably over my head. What's up, Frank Big Time? Hope you're doing well. Frank says, if determinism is true, it's sort of useless because the causality is too complex to predict anything. Yes, but maybe we can predict some things, why couldn't we do some limited stuff? We couldn't predict all the things because of course it'd be interpreting the entire matrix. We'd have to interpret the whole world, which would mean we'd have to understand the entire thing, which we can't do. That'd be like, you'd have to have like a God's eye view of it, but that doesn't mean we couldn't see certain patterns on the small scale. Cinesemiac says, I meant to say that this is the topic of the eternal return in part because we were talking about the cycles of thought and how they return always to the same questions but with slightly different answers. Well, I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure that we're going to get to something like that, Cinesemiotics, because if we're talking about like these, like, they're talking about like tighter and tighter rings of thought here. Sort of like the global stuff is coming all the way down into like just controlling even like the human life, and so we're gonna get there. I think we're just not there yet. So this is where we're going eventually. So we're gonna, like, this is starting to get to the eternal return, the eternal recurrence, but we're getting to cosmic necessity before it gets down to like individual level. Yeah, I mean, of course we're engaging in the process he will describe, but got to get there first. So, but got to set it up. Got to set the whole thing up. Yeah, see, the first explicit announcement of this new doctrine occurs in the Joyful Wisdom under the title, quote, The Heaviest Burden, and in connection with the complementary announcement of, quote, The Death of God. Yeah. Frank says, I think as soon as you predict a thing, you introduce uncertainty because it becomes likely that someone will deliberately thwart the prediction. I mean, are we talking like about something psychological? Are we talking about something like in physics? Because if you're talking about like, okay, there's going to be an eclipse in like 100 years or like whatever, like maybe there's going to be an eclipse in 3 weeks. I mean, you're predicting it, but like what sort of uncertainty are you bringing into it in that case? So Frank says, the lecturer says, no student will throw their shoe at me, which was effectively certain until they mentioned it. Yeah, I mean, you can affect stuff like that by saying, like, hey, you put the idea in someone's head that wasn't there before. And so by saying that, they increase the odds of getting a shoe thrown at them by like many times over. Yeah. Philosophers should be delighted to hear any sound objections. Absolutely. I mean, you can't just stick your fingers in your ears and be like, la, 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 la. Yeah. And it says, yeah, nothing is certain other than death and paying taxes. But yeah, predictions only go so far, as Han says. And that's right. Okay. But yeah, so here we go. Like, we're still getting, the author's still setting everything up because we've just got to the first mention of it, the first explicit announcement of it. So, there, explicit. Okay, quote, this life as thou livest it now, as thou hast lived it, thou must live it again and an infinite number of times, and there will be in it nothing new. But every grief and every joy, every thought and every sigh, all the infinitely great and the infinitely little in thy life must return for thee, and all this in the same sequence and the same order. And also this spider and the moonlight through the trees, and also this moment and myself. End quote. Here the idea is introduced, however, not as a metaphysical doctrine, but as an ethical imperative. To live as if, quote, the eternal hourglass of existence, end quote, will be ever turned again in order to impress on each of our actions the weight of an inescapable responsibility. Yes, so I thank you all for being here, because you are here forever. You can't leave. You will do this infinitely many times. In Zarathustra, where eternal recurrence is the basic inspiration of the whole work, it is not presented as a hypothesis, but as a metaphysical truth. Zarathustra pretends to reveal the highest kind of being. In conformity with the abiding truth of being, Zarathustra is also a plan of a new way of life. The characteristic subtitle which Nietzsche had planned for his chief work, and which he also used in the various plans for the will to power, is midday and eternity. Midday is to be understood as noontide, as the supreme instant of fulfillment, the climax and crisis in which the vision of eternity becomes once and for all decisive. The experience of this eternal instant is described as an ecstatic inspiration in which all being becomes speech in the most appropriate similes. Thus, Zarathustra's parables are not intended as mere poetry, but as a metaphysical language. Yeah, so all of a sudden, like, if you have to, like, be at every moment, be in, like, some sort of state of ecstasy, in contact with the eternal universe, then you are now, your existence is a metaphysical, like, infinitely big thing, because you will be doing this infinitely many times over the entire universe. So, sounds like an orgasm. I mean, I hope my orgasms do not sound like me droning on, but I can't hear them either. They're outside. So, but yeah, like that's the thing. It sounds like you have to make that one ecstatic moment, every moment to kind of ecstatic, yes. So. Yeah, come again, eternal return, yes. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, what is the metaphysics of being in constant universal contact with the entire universe? Continuing. In terms of the problem of time, what led Zarathustra to his crucial experience is briefly this: it is a conversion and rebirth to a great healthiness, out of an equally great sickness or despair, a sickness unto death. Okay, so now we're just getting our straight up Kierkegaard. Boom, full point. Yeah. The prophet of modern nihilism, whose counterpart is the prophet of eternal recurrence, for the latter is the exact reverse of the first. Yeah, because if nothing matters, the opposite is that everything has infinite metaphysical importance. Describes the sickness of modern man thus, quote, I saw great sadness come over mankind. The best turned weary of their works. A doctrine appeared, a faith ran beside it. All is empty, all is alike, all hath been. To be sure, we have harvested, but why have all our fruits become rotten and brown? What was it fell last night from the evil moon? In vain was all our labor, poison hath all our wine become. The evil eye hath singed yellow our fields and hearts. Arid have we all become, all our fountains have dried up, even the sea hath receded. All the ground trieth to gape, but the depth will not swallow. Alas, where is there still a sea in which one could be drowned? So soundeth our plaint across shallow marshlands. End quote. The critical time in which out of sickness great health is born is referred to as the highest time, in the double sense of despair, when time is running out, and of blessed climax. So here we are. Finally got it. You guys got there. When time is running out, and of blessed climax. Preceding the stillness of the supreme blessedness is the ghostly stillness of despair. The dialectic of despair and redemption, of depth and height, of darkness and light, is finally overcome in an abyss of light, the time of which is a standstill of time. Hence, the decisive instant of noontide is neither short nor long, but a timeless nunc stans or eternal. Yeah, this is, you can go back to the, there's an insult in Shakespeare, I remember. I forget why I remember this, but he says, go to hell for an eternal moment or so. It's like, yeah, this is like an instant, but the instant lasts forever. It's just a moment. It's an eternal moment. So... In it, the despair announced by the prophet of nothingness is turned into the bliss announced by Zarathustra, the prophet of the highest kind of being. Instead of despairing that all is alike and in vain, Zarathustra rejoins in the freedom from all too human purposes, in the eternal recurrence of all things, whose time is an ever-present circle, while the time of ordinary hopes and fears, of regret and expectation, is a straight line into an endless future and past. The discovery of the circulus vitiosus deus is to Nietzsche the way out of 2,000 years of falsehood, liquidating the Christian error when man believed in a progressive history determined by an absolute beginning and end, by creation and original sin at the one end, consummation and last judgment at the other end, both eventually secularized into the modern idea of an indefinite progress from primitive backwardness to civilized progressiveness. Cinesemiac says Black Mirror uses that in a futuristic way in the White Christmas episode, The Eternal Moment. That's cool. I should have watched Black Mirror. I did not. But yeah, so this is the whole thing. Like, the Christian idea of progress, you move from, original sin to like judgment, and then we have like secular progress. Nietzsche is saying, nope. None of that. It's at like the moment right now, and every moment is infinite, and so there is no sense of progress in this like sort of start, middle, end sort of thing. It's like, no, the infinite now is greater than all these things. And so this gets you out of the Christian or secular even cycle of, not cycle, but secular trajectory, I guess. It's still available on Netflix. Yeah, I've got too many things I'm doing. Like, I've got a list of things I should be doing, and then, I was like, you know what I'm going to do? Because I'm getting some things done. I went and bought beer, and I drank some beer yesterday. That's what I did. I was very excited about that. Yeah, like I said, I also bought emotes, so I'm, like, contracted for emotes, so I can work on stream things. It's, like, so many things. But, yeah, maybe one of these days. Over against this modern illusion resulting in the last man, Zarathustra proclaims the eternal recurrence of life in its unmoralized fullness of creation and destruction, of joy and suffering, of good and evil. While he is still convalescent, his animals say, quote, "Everything goeth, everything returneth. Eternally rolleth the wheel of existence. Everything dieth, everything blossometh forth again. Eternally runneth the wheel of existence. Everything breaketh, everything is integrated anew. Eternally buildeth itself the same house of existence. All things separate, all things again greet one another. Eternally true to itself remaineth the ring of existence. Every moment beginneth existence around every. Here rolleth the ball there. Here rolleth the ball there. The middle is everywhere. Crooked is the path of eternity." Yeah. So I guess this is also going back to the Heraclitus. The road up and road down is it's like crooked. It's curved. Like, you can't, like, even if you're going straight, you're still walking a crooked road. And so even if you think you're going like progress, the road up and road down is one and the same. It's like straight and crooked. So all of eternity is like this. You can't actually get anywhere. The middle is everywhere. So it's like there is no center of the universe. This also goes back to, I think it was Voltaire maybe, or someone, it was like all the rage to like back, they were getting better, so this was in the 1800s, I think, earlier than Nietzsche was writing. But part of, they were getting better astronomical data in. They were finally getting better optics. Yeah, all the Ets are confusing. Yeah, believe me, I have not read anything like this in a while. But like, they were getting better astronomical data, and so they were asking, where is the center of the universe? Because they started to realize it might not be the sun. Like, there were other stars out there. And so someone asked Voltaire where the center of the universe was, and apparently Voltaire was like, he had a cane just to walk around with, not that he needed it. And he slammed the cane down right in front of him and goes, "This is the center of the universe." So it's like, the middle is where you declare it to be. It's right in front of you and me. So it's like, this is the center of the universe right here, like the Twitch, like, space between me and like my webcam and you. That's the center of the universe. So but like, that's kind of this thing. It's like, where you existing right now, we are right here. This is the center of the universe. And so this is eternal, like this, and like right here, eternal. Okay. So, remembering, however, his sickness unto death, Zarathustra is not yet prepared to accept the idea that even the meanest type of man will recur again and again until his animals persuade him to reconcile himself with his particular fate, to proclaim this redeeming doctrine. Infernal says, "In the Inferno, I am the center of the universe, ha ha ha." Well, that is the point. That is the point. Like, you are the center of the universe, or it's right between you and your webcam. When you were discussing with other people, where is it? It's like, that is the middle of the universe as far as you're concerned. I like the Infernal is in the Inferno. That's good, Anne. All right. Now he is indeed the Superman, a man who has overcome himself by accepting voluntarily what cannot be otherwise, thus transforming an alien fate into his proper destiny. From now on, he lives by the experience of a perfect noontide when the world is perfect and time has flown away into the well of eternity. He is now a blesser and a yea-sayer. Quote, "This, however, is my blessing, to stand above everything as its own heaven, its round roof, its azure ball, and eternal security. For all things are baptized at the font of eternity, and beyond good and evil, this freedom and celestial serenity did I put like an azure bell above all things, when I taught that over them and through them no eternal will willeth." In the center of the Anoverse, yeah. Infernoverse. And that was the end of the quote. Eventually, he dedicates to the higher man his dithyramb on all eternity. And there's a little poetry quote. O man, take heed. What saith deep midnight's voice indeed? I slept my sleep, from deepest dream I've woke and pled. The world is deep, and deeper than the day could read. Deep is its woe, joy, deeper still than grief can be. Woe saith, hence go. But joys all want eternity, want deep, profound eternity. I mean, to be fair, Valpo, woke Nietzsche, Nietzsche has always been a hipster, favorite. So, yeah, so Zerbal equals blue ball. So you're saying he's blue balling us semiotics. I mean, it might just be the Earth, the blue ball. Although, would he have known the Earth looked like a blue ball? It might have. He might have known that, like the ocean. But I don't know if he would have known the Earth would have looked like a pale blue dot from space. But yeah. So this drunken song repeats the two songs on eternity at the end of the third book. They express the final unqualified yes and amen to all being as such, embracing and justifying also the existence of man. Oh yeah, he had syphilis. So does that make so not blue balls? Okay, that's funny. But that doesn't mean he didn't have blue balls. I think he, who knows when he got syphilis. Because Nietzsche, when he was older, did not look like the images you see of him. Apparently, when he was younger, he liked to dress up fancy. He liked to look sort of dapper. And so, but he was not. But he was always very weak. He was always kind of sick. And so, if you look at his if you look at his biography, it wasn't always so happy. He got syphilis, but it wasn't so sure that he had that many friends. And there was a thing, I believe, that his eyes were bad. And there was an old joke that he whacked off too much, and that his eyes went bad from masturbating, and this may have even been one of the the things that made that old wives' tale superstition. It's not true, but they made that that got said about him, and so that's why it became a bigger sort of saying that if you whack off, you lose your eyesight. So maybe, I don't know. Yeah, the syphilis was at the end of his life and wrote some batshit insane stuff. Yeah, so but it's different. When he was younger, he was very different from when he was older. So yeah, syphilis. Yeah, it got into his head. And that's what syphilis does. It gets into your head and fucks you up. I actually know somebody that got syphilis and was fucking with their head. It took a while before they figured out it was syphilis and they were able to reverse it. Not supposed to know that. I was told not to tell anyone that I knew that, but the chance of this getting back to that person is very small. And Cine says he was in a creepy, incestuous-ish love with his sister too. Really? I did not know that. Okay, if you say so. Yeah, I think I thought he went to prostitutes out in wherever city he was in. So at some point probably got it from one of them. But I don't know. Okay. By accepting with an ultimate will, willing backward the past as well as forward the future, eternal necessity as the highest consolation of being, the original contradiction between free will or history and fate seems to be solved. Tertiary is not so easily reversed? No. Okay, so this is some German I'm not even going to attempt to read. Zarathustra's soul is the most fated soul which out of joyful flingeth itself into chance. Yes, prostitutes. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought it was. I mean, nothing against prostitutes. It's just they didn't have the medicine we have now to get rid of these things. So it was unfortunate problems back then. Okay, the doctors wrote about which confirmed as being hetero. Well, at least bi. So. Because he was sleeping with the prostitutes at some point. And even, gay guys have slept with women at times too for various reasons. So it's hard to read back into time what are modern sort of or contemporary ideas. But yeah, it was suspected that he was sleeping with prostitutes, the women at least. Okay. Yeah, And it says, yeah, also bisexuality has always been around. Yeah, there's always been bisexuality. There's always been gay people. But the problem is, of course, as you get into smaller groups, there's just going to be less written about people. So it gets harder to, like, pick out exactly what people were because they didn't have the concepts back in the day. Yeah. Confirmed for their social senses. Yeah. Well, there's always the jokes online. It's like these two guys lived together back in the day and were known for their dinner parties and their like clothing collection. And it's like and they lived together for like 50 years. And it's like, okay, they were gay guys, but like they didn't have the term or they wasn't called that. It was just like two guys that lived together for a long time and had really good parties and clothing. It's like, okay. It confirmed for their social senses backwards, though they were. Back in the day, I mean, people dealt with things differently. Anyhow, whatever. Okay, not only does eternal recurrence answer the problem of Nietzsche's first writings, it is also the fundamental thought in his latest work. It says it's called sophistication, people. Some people have it, some people don't. It's like, yeah. Indeed, the description of Zarathustra's soul is identical in structure with the world of Dionysus, as described in the last aphorism of The Will to Power. Both represent the highest kind of being, and the last disciple of the philosopher Dionysus is also the prophet of eternal recurrence. And just as The Will to Power has as its critical motive and aim in the transvaluation of all Christian values, the Antichrist being the first book of The Will to Power, so Zarathustra is the most elaborate counter-gospel to the Christian gospel, and its theological presuppositions for the doctrine of eternal recurrence counteracts the doctrine of creation with all its moral consequences. Dionysus as well as Zarathustra are essentially against Christ. Zarathustra's friends celebrate his memory in utter blasphemy by the festival of the donkey, that symbol of stupidity who repeats time and again nothing but yeah. So yeah, I guess that's how donkeys sound. So is there anything to say here? It's like basically this has always been one of the criticisms of Nietzsche as far as I was concerned. It's that he's reactionary against Christians. It's like he's doing something explicitly anti-Christian, and in some sense that does not necessarily get him outside of Christianity. That makes him reactive against Christianity. So is it really different from the ideas, or is it reactive against them? I don't know. But like, I've always had the feeling that he did not actually escape what he was trying to escape in the last analysis. Semiac says, did Schopenhauer influence Nietzsche, or was that even possible based on their timeline? That's the sort of thing we could look up in Wikipedia or just like Google real fast. I just do. TZSEHE show. Let's see. So how Nietzsche psychoanalyzes Schopenhauer. Let's see the influence of it. See real fast. Okay, so yes, Nietzsche read it. So it says right here. This is in the Phil Review, which is, this is from 1901 Phil Review. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, but I can drop you the link in chat actually from this. You like Nietzsche's Schopenhauer as educator, yeah. So, but I mean, of course, does that mean that Nietzsche read him? I don't know, but apparently this right here says that he did. So, yeah, so the book was new to him and he carried it home and he read it. So, yeah. So you can look it up if you're interested. Huge influence on Kubrick. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so people celebrated Zarathustra's memory by praying to the donkey, by the festival of the donkey, and the one who repeats time and again nothing but yay. So the bleeding of the donkey over and over. Eternity as the eternal yea, or self-affirmation of being, which repeats itself in periodic cycles, remains throughout the leitmotif of Nietzsche's intellectual passion. In a letter written after the onset of insanity, he confesses that though he would have preferred to remain a simple professor, he had no choice but to sacrifice himself as the buffoon of the new eternities. If there is, you see, this is the problem. I think he's starting to realize the buffoon of the new eternities. Did he actually get where he wanted to get, or is he an idiot in the face of this new god that he made, the new eternity? I don't know. But, like, that's the question. Did he actually succeed? And this has always been my question about this. Like, does the eternal return indicate a good thing, or are we just fools in front of it? All right, if there's such a thing as a history of ideas, then the idea of the eternal recurrence is an amazing example, considering Nietzsche's revival of this classic idea after 2,000 years of Christian tradition. Of course, the idea itself did not persist and reappear like an old relic by chance excavation. Rather, the historical situation became again controversial. It is contemporary Christianity which evoked in Nietzsche the revival of an idea which was basic for pagan thinking. Placed at the final stage of an evaporated Christianity, he had to search for new sources of the future, and he found them in classic paganism. The death of the Christian God made him again understand the ancient world. It is of secondary importance that he knew this world through his professional studies as a classical philologist. Many scholars were familiar with the doctrine of eternal recurrence in Heraclitus and Empedocles, Plato and Aristotle, Eudemos and the Stoics, but only Nietzsche perceived it in his creative possibilities for the future in opposition to a dying Christianity. Yeah, I mean, now that they say it like this, of course, there's been monism forever, where everything is one, and so of course nothing is changing in monism because everything's only one. There is no distinction there. So this is where you get the monists back here. This stuff, like these things are like monisms. Not Heraclitus wasn't really monist, but like you can get that in the classics. Nietzsche did not realize, however, that his own Contra Christianos was an exact replica in reverse of the Contra Gentiles of the fathers of the church. Not only the doctrine of eternal recurrence, which was discussed by Justin, Origen, and Augustine, but all the general topics of Christian apologetics against pagan philosophers recur in Nietzsche's philosophy with the standpoints interchanged. What are monisms? Monisms are just theories that everything is one. It's goes back to Parmenides, where it's all one thing. The entire universe is one, and anytime we think anything's changing, we're just confused in some way, shape, or form, because the universe is all just one thing. It's not anything. It has no distinction. It's just one thing. So that's what a monism is, a theory of it. And so monisms, of course, there's more than one way to think about it. So they're theories of monism, basically. For Nietzsche's philosophy, and in particular his, quote, Antichrist, end quote, is a repetition of the old complaint that Christians are host humani generis, a mean race of slaves, people of bad breeding and taste. The historical coincidence of the ancient and modern attack against Christianity indicates the lasting significance of the first and the historical importance of the second, though the first had been forgotten until Nietzsche resumed it. Okay, so they're just saying basically this is the throwback to these pre-Christian thought of where there is no progress because it's all one. It's a monism. On account, however, of the new historical situation which led Nietzsche to rediscover the ancient doctrine, the idea of eternal recurrence did not simply recur as the same, but was greatly and fatally changed. It was Nietzsche's noble passion to sing a new song of the innocence of cyclic being and becoming, on the level, however, of Christian experience. So this is actually very interesting, because this is what I was wondering about. Did Nietzsche actually do anything, or is it just an on the level of Christianity? Hey, what's up, Lumpy Dragon Potato? Hope you're well. I was lurking your stream earlier today. Hope it went well. I was doing other stuff. Thus, so we're just talking some Nietzsche and the eternal recurrence of the same. Like, what exactly, according to this author, was going on. And they're basically saying, look, it was this really anti-Christian doctrine going back, throwback to the classic views of how the universe was. You bought a printer but forgot the paper. That's sad. Oh. Thus Zarathustra, it from cover to cover, indeed a counter gospel, a new sermon on the immortality in the kingdom of God. To the Greeks, eternal recurrence was the manifestation of a universal rational order and beauty, but to Nietzsche it is the heaviest burden because it conflicts with his radically modern will. To the Greeks, the eternal recurrence of generation and corruption explain natural occurrences as well as historical events. To Nietzsche, the acceptance of eternal recurrence requires a standpoint beyond man and time. The Greeks felt awe and reverence for fate. Nietzsche makes superhuman effort to love it. He undoubtedly achieved the metamorphosis from the Christian thou shalt to the modern I will, but hardly the crucial transformation from the I will to the I am of the cosmic child, which is innocence and forgetfulness, a new beginning and self-rolling wheel. As a modern man, Nietzsche was so hopelessly divorced from any genuine loyalty to the earth and from the feeling of eternal security under the bell of heaven that his great effort to remarry man's destiny to cosmic fate or to translate man back into nature as the original text cannot but be frustrated. Thus, wherever he tries to develop his doctrine rationally, it breaks asunder into two irreconcilable pieces. In a presentation of eternal recurrence as an object of fact, to be demonstrated by physics and mathematics, and in a quite different presentation of it as a subjective hypothesis to be demonstrated by its ethical consequences. It breaks asunder because the will to eternalize the chance fact of the modern ego does not fit into the assertion of the impersonal eternal cycle of the natural world. Oh, good night, Lumpy. Thanks for stopping by. Time change is making you tired. Yeah, it's unusual day today, so thanks for coming by. If anyone doesn't know Lumpy, we've got a few streamers here now. Can just give some shout outs. Let's give a shout out to Lumpy Dragon Potato. Lumpy is a Minecraft streamer. Builds these sort of fantastical buildings and is making a little city. It's kind of cool. And, you know, he's got some architectural chops, so they're very cool buildings. Chill stream, talk about whatever you want on the stream. Good vibes. And we also have, I'll give some more shout outs in a minute, but you can only give one of the proper shout outs once a minute, so wait on the later ones. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Does Nietzsche succeed? And this author is actually saying no, because Nietzsche is too modern with the psychology. The psychology of trying to be rational in a contemporary way is still this sort of theory of progress, and that is breaking down for the eternal recurrence because Nietzsche is trying to describe the eternal recurrence in a rationalistic way, and rational is still a theory of progress, that you can go from like a certain number of thoughts to like some more thoughts. You're like increasing your rational understanding of the world. And so this author is claiming that sort of the attempt to get out of the Christian sort of progress metaphor is failing because the way Nietzsche is going about describing the eternal recurrence fails because he's doing it in a rational way. So to the Greeks was a universal rational order. See, a universal rational order, but to Nietzsche it conflicts with his radically modern will. So this is a universal versus a modern will, which is personal. Nietzsche's will with his. It's a personal thing here. And so this is the thing. The way the universe was just always, you know, the same, it was always coming back to itself, that had nothing to do with us. But once you start trying to rationalize this, now you've got problems. So that's an interesting theory here, that the way we are describing something in a rational sort of like progression to explain stuff to people is actually going to counteract what you're saying when it comes to the eternal return. Nietzsche was not so much the last disciple of the pagan god Dionysus as the first radical apostate of Christ. Yeah, so now it is anti-Christian now. It's not going back to the old stuff. As such, however, he was what the last pope called him, and this is the last pope in 1945. So this is a while ago. I don't know who the pope was. The most pious of the godless. So that's an interesting thing. Yeah, like he his reaction against Christianity made him by reacting so hard against Christianity the most pious of the godless. So when he created the figure of the last pope who is out of office after the death of God. Oh, maybe this was his idea, actually. Nietzsche is not the actual pope. When he created the figure of the last pope who is out of office after the death of God, he understood himself perfectly well as a religious figure. Zarathustra and the pope understand each other because both are dedicated and consecrated and not profane. Toward the end of their conversation, the old pope says to Zarathustra, "O Zarathustra, thou art more pious than thou believest with such an unbelief. Some God in thee hath converted thee to thine ungodliness. Nigh unto thee, though thou professest to be the ungodliest one, I feel a hale and holy odor of long benedictions. I feel glad and grieved thereby. Let me be thy guest, O Zarathustra, for a single night. Nowhere on earth shall I now feel better than with thee. Amen." "So shall it be," said Zarathustra with great astonishment. Pius the 11th. Scandalous regarding the Holocaust. Interesting. I bet this isn't. I think this is part of the story, though. So this is not. This is part of Nietzsche's story. And that's it. This is the end. Hartford Theological Seminary. Interesting. And Phil says his reactivity was exactly what the world needed to get out of that domination the world was stuck into. Like how many of us found a lot of sense in his words when we thought God hated us. His words gave generations of people hope, a sense that we weren't alone. No, I think that's the thing. Like, he really was speaking to the Christians. And so did he escape Christianity? Not really, because he was completely in that area, like in that mindset. And so this is the whole point right at the end right here. It's that he is trying to escape, but in reacting so hard against the Christian sort of worldview, it became reactionary, and so he was still tied to it in that last analysis. And I think that's what the author's trying to say right here. When what I guess the last pope in the story, not the actual pope, was saying is that even though you are like you profess to be ungodly, it doesn't matter. Like, you profess to be ungodly, but it doesn't actually matter because it seems like you have a benediction on you. So you have the holy odor of long benedictions. So even though you're ungodly, you're still been tied down. You have the odor, some last little whiff of being blessed. His father was a Christian minister. That's how these things go. Same with Heidegger. So, yeah. That explains it. Yeah, I think this is exactly what's going on here. And I think this is a very nice paper, because I'm not a Nietzsche scholar. I have had, everybody in philosophy has to deal with it because he's such a big name. But, this is put well. I think I agree with the analysis in what little I know. But yeah, and Nietzsche is always fun because you get to talk about fun things, and he gets to write poetry and sounds good, as opposed to a lot of the dry philosophy we read here and gets written nowadays. So yeah, now does this paper has the old feel to it. It definitely, if you were to write this paper now, you couldn't do these long quotes. You'd have to sit there and explain all this crap. So yeah. Frank Big Time says, "The Pope in my fan fiction proclaimed that my MC is just as pious as them too." That's awesome. Yeah. So yeah. So this is the thing. If you're going to try to get away from something, being reactionary is not always the best strategy. Reactionary will get you some insight, reacting against stuff, but just going against does not necessarily get you somewhere new. So that was the thing. Nietzsche was trying to get back to the Greek sort of pre-Christian understanding of the world, but couldn't do it because his rationality was still based in a sort of Christian rationality. Valpo says, "Choosing to believe that you're talking about a rapper than a main character." Yeah, my MC. Yeah, I didn't know who it was, but I realized MC stands for Master of Ceremony. So it's main character one way or the other. See, MC went to Master of Ceremony, but that meant main character basically in my head anyway. So a rapper is being an MC is the main character's master of ceremony. And Phil says Ben Shapiro has made a career of being reactionary and yet bringing nothing new to the table. Oh yeah, like it pays well. Like Nietzsche is not gonna die. Like the name is not gonna die for a long time because this is good stuff. Like this is interesting. This is fun. And so you're like Ben Shapiro. I mean, reactionary. This is the problem. You can make a career out of it. Is it anything good? No. Ben Shapiro is kind of a jackass, and like, who wants to deal with Ben Shapiro? Not even like apparently his own wife. So it's like, yeah, he's made a lot of money, but you know, so do scammers. It's like, okay, if all you want is money, you can get it. But again, I don't want to like get into this because I actually know almost nothing about it. But yes, Valpo is Dr. Wife. I really don't know anything about. Oh, you're gonna have to look it up. But like apparently, he said some like offhand comments that makes it sound like his wife doesn't really like him. So, like he was saying stuff apparently, and then it was one of those. No, Ben, that isn't a good thing. So something like that. Yeah. I could be wrong. I have no love for Ben Shapiro. I don't like people who go on the internet and, you know, treat their opponents poorly. I come on here and I read people who are published. I'm not crapping on like grad students who aren't published reading stuff and be like, you idiot, ha ha ha, you don't know what you're talking about. But like I feel like a lot of these internet celebrities, they're not giving a fair shake to their opponents. All the stuff I read's already published. What I say doesn't matter. They've already gotten their benefit. You got to go, but that was cool. Well, thank you for, thanks for the suggestion. Thanks for the sub. I appreciate it. And, I read poetry you suggested earlier with the Taco Bell Quarterly. So have a great night, and thanks for being here. And if you ever start streaming, I'll shout you out. But, yeah. Yeah, we should have like a... If you ever have like a link you want to share, drop it in, because I know you do video projects. So, cool. Yeah. Anything else to say here? And I feel bad even mentioning Ben Shapiro in the same sentences with Nietzsche, because Nietzsche did something here. As Anne was saying, like, this is, had a lot of legs. Nietzsche has legs. I don't think Ben Shapiro is going to be remembered. It's going to be just one of the many internet celebrities that were, popular for a little while. And, made, like, angsty people feel cool on the internet for a bit. Yeah, he's a clown. Exactly. And so, like, and I doubt he's even a good clown. But, like, yeah. And, like, whatever Nietzsche is, he's not a clown. So, okay, cool.